What's happening in the canine industry? For all the latest news, views, and expert opinions, stay right here for the Canine Paradigm. You'll hear from industry leaders, experts, doyens of the industry, learned colleagues, movers and shakers, and the odd randy guest. Get the latest insights and expert advice from both here and abroad from the people in the know. Now, here are your hosts, Glenn Cook and Pat Stewart. And I'm Lofty Fulton, and I'm out of here.
Glenda?
Yes.
We have to do a new ad.
We do.
It's a solemn time. Mm-hmm. Our long-time sponsor of the show, George Kittredge,
Yes.
very, very sadly passed away. And we formerly used to advertise for him his Rowdy Hound boxes.
We did.
So we don't actually know what's happened with Rowdy Hound boxes. You know anything about that?
I looked at the website. It said that they're recalibrating since their founder and boss has passed. But nonetheless, I think that you and I want to honour the memory of George Kittredge anyway. He was a friend to both of us, a hell of a good guy, and he supported us almost immediately. He was on board through and through, and I just don't want any of us to forget George. He was a terrific human being.
So we intend to continue to advertise Rowdy Hound, even though we don't know what's going on with them.
Yep.
In the hopes that they keep going, and that can be a bit of George's legacy that we're able to continue to promote.
I hope so.
In checking it out, we had a look to see, because we're not real good with the sponsorship. So we had a look to see who's actually paying for sponsorship. And we have a list of people to tell you that we support. And the first is our sugar mama, Barbara de Groot.
She's been with us from the start as well. Barbara's been an absolute staple in our...
She's a gem.
She is a gem.
She has a business.
She does. From the Heart Dog Training.
From the Heart Dog Training.
Yep.
You can check it out. But she supports us as much and more than anybody ever has. So we appreciate you very much, Barbara. Another person who's supported us from the start.
The Einzelwiener.
Einzelwiener.
The Bullfed.
The Bullfed.
Yep.
It's where I get all my stuff.
Yeah.
It is, truly. It's where I get all my dog gear. If I need something, Jason's my first point of call. I don't use his shit website. He has a website. It's dog shit. I just message him directly. You guys probably should use his shit website, but I don't.
Yeah, because you don't want to message him directly and get his grumpy ire of the day.
Yeah, but do it. Get all your dog stuff from Jason. He's got everything you need. He's got all the shit that you need to train a dog for realty.
Everybody who comes to seminars and looks at meals and asks me meals questions, ask Jason.
Yeah.
Jason can point you in the right direction for getting the meal that's best suited for you.
I really like his leashes. I'm a big fan of his leash pack. That's why I sort of convinced him to do it. But anyway, get your stuff from Einzelwiener.
Yep.
Do you know who has a fantastic website and ships internationally?
My wife?
Your wife,
Yeah.
Canine Pharmaceuticals.
I couldn't imagine her not having a good website, how much of a perfectionist she is.
Well, the products are amazing. My dog merely being alive is a walking testimonial to that. My dog, who I've retired numerous times and has come out of retirement when I've managed to get his body back to healthy. And a big part of that is related to Canine Pharmaceuticals. So check it out, everybody.
I could say so many nice and biased things about Canine Pharmaceuticals and my wife, but what I will say is ignore me. Just look at testimonials. The testimonials speak for themselves. That's where the field trials are working. What makes Narelle's day, and mine as well, is when people are emailing in and sending messages of, well, primarily people have had no hope in the past because just everything that they were trying wasn't working, and now it is. And that is the testament that something is actually really working. And the other thing which I will add, one of the things that Narelle's told me in the past is dogs are incapable of understanding the placebo effect.
Oh, that's a good point.
So you can fake it on a human, but you can't fake it on a dog.
I never thought about that before. That's actually a really good point.
Well, my wife's actually a very smart person.
There you go.
So she's told me that humans are subject to the placebo effect where dogs are not. So it either works or it doesn't on dogs.
There you go. That makes total sense.
Yep.
There's one other person who puts a fair amount of work into this show.
Yeah.
It's me.
Yeah. Funny about that.
And I have a digital product that you can buy. If you go to my website, seriousdogbusiness.com, right now I've got 2 courses available to you. The Overview, which is a small course where you could learn how I teach.
Yep.
But the other one is the Wave Tops, which is a bigger course. It's everything I know about dog training. Well, it's not everything. It's a lot of what I know about dog training.
Yeah,
check it
terrific.
out.
Yeah.
$500 dues. That's all it's going to cost you.
I recommend it when people are saying, what do I do? How do I get in the industry? I recommend them to your course.
Oh, wonderful. Thanks,
Yeah.
sir. All right, on with the show. Welcome back to the Canine Paradigm. I'm your host, Pat Stewart, and I'm joined today by my co-host, Glenn Cook.
I'm here. How are you?
Hello, sir. I'm wonderful. How are you?
I'm good.
Hey, let's get into it. Let's just start out.
Why not? Let's do it. Let's just rip the Band-Aid straight off.
So we have an email that we're going to go through. It's about burnout and failure. And I'm going to read it. I might omit a couple of details, but it says, "Hi, Pat and Glenn. I had a topic I was interested in getting your input on and also hearing from other dog trainers as well. Is coming to burnout considered a failure? I've been in the dog training space since 2011, right after graduating high school. From 2011 to 2019, I worked incredibly hard doing all different types of training and apprenticeships until I finally opened my own training business. Although we've had a good 5 years, I'm incredibly burnt out. I'm an in-person traveling trainer in the extremely busy city of, I'll leave that out, with the price increases across the board, the traffic, and the work I'm doing, behavior modification, and some really tough cases, I've started realizing that this just isn't what I want to do anymore. On top of that, I work full-time and I'm the primary caretaker of our son, as my fiance is the main breadwinner. Trying to balance it all has taken a toll and I've hit a wall. I'm now changing course to become a canine detection handler, which has always been my dream, but my family and friends are a little surprised that after everything I've worked so hard for, I'm stepping away. They don't understand the level of burnout we face. Still, I can't help but feel like I've somehow failed by not wanting to keep doing this. So I'm curious, do you or others in your field see burnout as failure? Thanks so much for taking the time to read this. I really appreciate your perspective. I thought that we might explore this a little bit today, and I want to sort of reframe it just a little bit and talk about something that happened on the weekend. So you and I were at a PSA trial on the weekend. You were judging. I was a senior decoy trial that the Grit Dog Sport guys hosted. Everything went really well, except that on Sunday, it was torrential rain at times, like scary sort of conditions rain at times. Like it was just a heavy rain day, but you know, as it does, it comes and goes in waves at points. There was almost no times when it wasn't raining, but there were periods where it was only raining really hard versus like terrifyingly hard, and you couldn't hear anything. It was like proper torrential rain.
There was a time where I was in the tent speaking to the admin girls just about the points, and we were getting ready for one of the competitors to step on the field, and you guys were all standing out in the rain because you were all soaking wet anyway, and I popped around the corner and gave you like the let's pull this for the moment because I couldn't hear anything that was going on outside. It was coming down so hard. You have to look at it from a duty of care and a safety point of view where you think to yourself, if I can't hear what people are saying, if the dog can't hear the commands from the people, if people are soaking wet and the floor is running with water and all of this is going on around you, then it's an unsafe workplace. And that's kind of how you have to look at dog sports or dog training. It's a workplace and you have to treat it as such. You have to kind of advocate for the dogs, for the people, for the spectators, for everyone around them. There's no point in going out there to do something fun and not having fun by breaking an arm or leg or having a serious fall or the dog mistargeting and hurting itself or hurting the decoy. It's just not worth it. You know, at those stages, and there have been trials that have cancelled in the USA over torrential downpours before. Like I've seen posts from judges on the judges group saying, hey, the rain came down so hard I had to literally cancel the trial. Everyone in the group said you did the right thing. You have to make these calls. You have to look at things from a duty of care perspective.
Yeah. We didn't have to cancel the trial. We were able to continue. We just had some pauses where we're like, oh, okay, we'll sit this out for 10 minutes and see if it clears up a bit. But of course, you know, during the trial, and that was on the second day of the trial, during the trial, even though I believe that everybody sort of prepares for work in the rain, our own club's group chat is notorious for that. We train in two places. Here at my shop, we're completely undercover. There is no outdoor section. And then at your place where we go there specifically to use the outdoor area and we want to use that the most. And while there is an indoor area, we always try and like be as outdoor there as possible. And there's been times when I have been guilty of being like, oh, fuck that. Let's train indoors. And Jazz is usually the one that's like, what? We're just going to hope that it never rains at a trial. Is that what we're going to hope happens here? And so we try to train in the rain. It's part of it. It's, you know, there's an old army saying, if it ain't raining, it ain't training. But things happen, right? And of course, nobody trains in like torrential rain. We train when it's like drizzling a little bit. But anyway, throughout the trial, there were a couple of people on the second day who could feel that they were losing their dogs. And one of the things that we do, and like I'm doing less and less of it now, but the PSA trials that we've been at in Australia, since we've been able to run our own trials in the limited capacity we do, I have taken a role because we're really trying to build the game, right? We're not just looking to play it. We're looking to build a whole network of people doing it, which has been super successful. We're now at like 7 clubs, I think. And this year we're on track to have 4 trials. There's been 2 already. Things are going great for PSA in Australia. And part of that has been that I've been trying to educate people about it. And one of the tricky things about PSA is because of the way that the field is laid out, because of the way that the nature of the surprise scenarios, because of the way that the game actually unfolds, as an enthusiast that turns up and is like, oh, what's this? If you've been to one trial before and then you go into a second trial, it might look completely different to you. Like I've certainly even seen people who have been dragged along to the trial. They're not that into it. They're there with someone else. And a level 1 at one trial can look completely different to a level 1 at another. Like it's not even necessarily discernible about what's going on just because of the nature of how it's laid out and the way the game's played. So I've been sort of much more at the start and much less now playing a role of something like an announcer or something like that to explain to people what's going on. So we would explain right from the start, like, oh, well, this is the PDC. It's the protection dog certificate. It's sort of like our equivalent of a BH if you had to draw some sort of parallel in that it's a certificate that gets you in the ability to play the game. It's more of a temperament test. It's considered a simple test, not necessarily easy, but simple, that we can just discern, do you have good control of your dog? Will your dog bite and, handle a decent amount of pressure and let go? That's all we're looking to discern. And then once you do that, you can then go on to the competitive levels. So I explain all that. I explain that to the crowd. This is what you're seeing. This is why this is happening. And then because PSA, there's a lot going on and there's some complex stuff. And then even more so once you start getting into surprise scenarios and level 2 and eventually we've had here now a level 3, 30 seconds worth of level 3, but we had some. We're explaining to people, oh, that went how it was meant to go. Because a lot of times in the crowd, and this is certainly true of PSA, even for people who love and know the game really well, when you're watching a video or you're just watching a trial, you actually often don't know how things are meant to go because there is no meant to. It's a surprise. Like the only people that actually know what's meant to happen here are the people who were at the handler meeting and know what's going down. So I tend to try and explain this stuff to the crowd. So one of the things that I found myself explaining to the crowd on the weekend was that in PSA, it's okay to pull the pin. In fact, it's not just okay, like it's encouraged. And I know that's not the case in all sports. Now, I don't want to speak like broadly for all sports in general, but because I know that even within the different sports, like say we say IGP or Mondio, whatever, there's different governing bodies of those things and they feel differently about different situations. But I know in certain sports, and certainly, I'm not just talking about protection sports either. In certain sports, it can be considered like rude or it can be considered disrespectful to the judge to quit, to partway through the trial, just go like, no, I'm done, I'm out. And in PSA, we don't do that. We don't think that that's the case because if the trial is not going the way that you would like, we are aware that the dog is always learning. The dog is in a learning situation. You know that this is a testing day. But to the dog, this is another learning day. This is the same thing. We're just doing it in a different way. And every experience that the dog has is going to go into the pool of experience that the dog has had in its past and is going to create influence over the way that the dog will act in the future. So what we do within PSA is that you can pull. If at any point during the trial you go like, I don't have the level of control that I want, maybe my dog is not performing the way that I want, I get a sense that I've already lost critical points, that I'm not going to be able to proceed, I'm not going to be able to pass. So what's the point in just, continuing around here and showing my dog a bunch of competition style pictures that I don't really need him to see because I'm no longer eligible to actually pass this. So we encourage people at that point, or not necessarily encourage, but it's absolutely okay and allowed to just go, nah, I'm done. I'm pulling. Thank you everybody for your efforts, but I'm leaving. And that's a totally normal thing. But as I said, that's not normal in all sports. So I found myself at one point explaining that to the crowd, sort of going over to the crowd of people who are all huddled under a tent and saying, because there's, as well as when it actually happened on the weekend, no one could see or nobody knew what was happening. They just knew through the torrential rain, they could see a competitor on the field 1 minute and then they could see him, a third of the way through his test decide, nah, that's it and I'm leaving. So I went over and I explained that. And that's the frame that I want to place over this idea of burnout equaling failure. In line with our email here, I think that the only way that burnout truly equals failure is when you just burn out, and when you just keep riding it into the ground and hate your life and continue getting up every morning to go and do something that you no longer love that you're no longer passionate about, that you're no longer driven to do just because you feel compelled that you have to. Like there's some kind of external force upon you saying, well, it would be considered rude. And I think that's the lens that I want to view this through, because even the way that our listeners ask the question is like the second last line here. So I'm curious, do you or others in our field see burnout as a failure? And there's this element, like I can feel it within the writing there. There's this element of like, am I letting people down? Am I letting down the industry? Am I letting down the dogs that I'm no longer going to be servicing? And I think that that's the sort of attitude of this same, like, is it rude to the judge to put on a trial? It's a lot of work. You drive, it's over an hour for you to get there. It's an hour and a half for me. We have 7 decoys there. The grounds are set up. Like it's a lot of stuff. It's a lot of things come together for us to create this. And there's this external pressure then of like, well, you're going to fucking use it. We've set all this up. We've done all this for you. We've created this opportunity for you. You're going to write it out. You're going to write it into the ground, whether you like it or fucking not. And that's just not the case. That's just not healthy. That's just not how life should be. We can explore it more for sure. But that's like, for me off the bat, I think that the only time that burnout, especially in our space, right? But the only time that burnout equals failure is when you allow yourself to get completely burnt out to the point where you never want to do it again. And that's what I mean when we go into trial. And if things fall apart and then you just go, hey, this is not helping me. This is not setting me up for success at my next trial. I'm out of here. I'm not going to continue along this. And I think that's what's important when we think about burnout in our space, is that do the things that you need to do to look after yourself. And when you're in the midst of it, when it's actually all going on around you, maybe the thing to do is to step out completely. Maybe the thing is like, okay, this is not helping. Like, to use my trial analogy again, there's certain things you can get away with. There's handler help. You can reset, you can give extra commands. There's things you can do along the way. But at a certain point, you have to say, hey, this doesn't serve me. This doesn't serve me. And by not serving me, it doesn't serve others. There's nobody else who wants to just see me ride this into the ground. So take a step back and realign before the thing that you're doing begins to actually feel like punishment, like before it actually starts to leave such a bad taste in your mouth that you never want to do it again.
Well summarized, without trying to echo too many of those points from my own observations, because I was on the field watching people when they were watching their own dog falling apart. It was nice that people advocated for their dog and thought, I just don't want my dog to have any further bad experiences out here. I want to pull my dog right now. Somebody came up to me and actually said, hey, sorry. And I said, no, nothing to be sorry about. I was hoping that you would actually collect things up and pull the dog and walk off the field. I think you did the right thing. I am in full support of you. And then we walked up and, at that stage, everybody gave them a round of applause, because I feel that the audience also chimed in on that and felt like, hey, you did the right thing. Today just wasn't your day. I feel that you learn a lot about those sort of things. Like every time you step onto a field or every time you have these feelings, you need to sort of analyze, how do I feel about this at the moment, and what's going on around me and what's available to me right now. Let's use a trial, for example, when things are falling apart. Like what's happening right now? What's happening is the dog and I have disconnected from each other. That umbilical cord of control, or that mechanism of understanding, or that synchronization that we had previously, for some reason that's corrupted between us right now. Like something happened and that fell away. So I don't have it anymore. I'm disconnected from the dog. And it's like, for people who don't know what that's like, it's like being disconnected from the internet. Like you're thinking, hang on a minute, I was working, I was connected to the internet, now I'm not, like I'm offline. At that stage, you can feel a little bit useless and think, well, what am I supposed to do now? People run around and panic when they're offline. You see anytime, not that it's happened a lot, but in the past when Instagram or Facebook have had a server issue and people have lost their minds and thinking, oh my God, it's World War III, what's happening? There are times like I've had internet down and I've thought, well, that's not such a bad thing. I've got other things I can go off and do now. I'll come back later and see if it's up. It's a pain in the ass. You wish it didn't happen and you wish you were still plugging through whatever that you're working on. And people feel like that with their dog as well. Like when they're on the field, they kind of think, oh, it's a pain in the ass. I've done all this effort. I'm here. I could have got my title. Coulda, woulda, shoulda. Well, Maybe not. Maybe you just have to analyze on a day where rain starts to fall. Have you done enough work in the rain? Have you done enough preparation? Have you thought about the processes that you need to do to make this work? And sometimes that isn't the case. Sometimes people are just totally unprepared for what's going to happen. But understand that part of the advocacy and taking control of those moments is saying, okay, I can see what's going wrong here. I have the fortitude to see the future if I keep trying to push through this. If I continue down this track, here's what's possibly going to happen. Things are going to spiral out of control. My dog, because we're talking about dogs and trials at the moment, and we're going to get back to this topic header in a minute, but my dog is now learning that when things happen like this sets up a different scenario. And even though you're not thinking that the dog is being rewarded, in the dog's mind, and I saw you put out a post about you punish the dog, but the dog has a belief that it's right in its thinking, and you're in dangerous territory when those sort of things happen, because that's a true version of what conflict is. You're in direct conflict right now. So you can be in conflict on a field in a situation like that because you're thinking, oh, I'm having a terrible time. The dog's having a terrible time. But the dog's thinking, oh, no, I'm having a good time running around doing all this shit and it's fun and I'm getting rewarded here. But you're thinking, oh, the dog's not liking it because we're in the rain and, this is why the routine is falling apart. But the dog's thinking, well, I am disconnected. The sever has been broken and I'm free and I can run around and do all this sort of stuff. That's not the sort of thing that you want your dog to learn out on fields for future prep and future trial work. You kind of want it to have it where you think, nope, okay, I can see that the tie is broken between the dog and I. This is where it stops right now. And you walk the dog off the field. So then the dog goes, oh, okay, so if I start fucking around, it's all over. This is when I go back to the car. Even though the dog didn't directly do or try to do anything reckless or irresponsible, it still at that point has to understand this is where it ends. Like I can't just disconnect from you and just choose my own adventure from this point on. I still need to listen. I still need to be under control. When you whistle for me or when you give me a command, I still have to follow through with those type of things. Effectively, what I'm saying is there still has to be some organizational chart, some procedure, some flow-on effect that means that management needs to take precedence over what's going on. To make this relevant to the person's original point and question before, a lot of people, when they're struggling with anything like that, it's natural for them to feel like they're failing. And it's points that you and I have raised in previous conversations, especially when you're looking at perfect life scenario put through the lens of social media, which is a fabricated life. I've seen people put media out there where you would think everything that's going on in their life is spotless and perfect, and yet things are chaotic in their personal life outside the camera. Like they are literally falling apart and the world around them is just in absolute turmoil. But turn the camera on and press the button, it looks like everything is just absolutely perfect. There are a lot of people, especially housewives in the 60s and 70s and so forth, they were literally at home drunk off the head the entire day because they were expected to stay home and maintain a perfect home, shut up, be quiet, don't say anything, raise the kids, dress immaculately, serve their husband when they came home. And it led to super high rates of depression and suicidal tendencies and so forth, because that's not real and that's a fabrication. It was expected that your home was immaculate, you looked immaculate, your hair was perfectly groomed, your makeup was on, the kitchen was spotless and the kids looked immaculate. But we know that that's not reality. Like kids are messy and time schedules are poor and people need things to stimulate themselves. They need jobs to occupy their brain. They need a mission. They need something to do. But getting back to sometimes when those jobs don't actually line up and you're not really enjoying what you're doing, or it's just too much of what you're doing, then yes, sometimes you need to have a shift of sails, like you need to have a change of direction. And one of the points that you brought up before, Pat, about knowing whether that's failure or not, I think for me, I'm not going to talk for anyone else because we're all vastly or slightly different from each other. I think for me, where I find that I'm failing in it is when I'm not talking to people about it, like people that I can get some sort of beneficial therapy. a birdie type person. When I'm really struggling with something and I just don't talk to Narelle about it and say, hey, I'm struggling with things, because sometimes spouses can be ashamed to tell their other half, I'm struggling. I don't feel mortal at the moment. Things are going wrong. There's cracks appearing in my life, because then they think my spouse will probably think there's something wrong with me, like I'm not the man in the house, or I'm not a good wife, or I'm not a good partner to my partner because I'm feeling this way. So there's lots of things that happen. The reason I know this is because I've experienced a lot of these feelings myself. You're only human. We all suppress things that we sometimes shouldn't. This leads to some compounding issue where things start to come undone. The internal wiring starts to burn out, and you can feel that things aren't quite right. It's important to talk about them to people and to also identify them and saying, I am feeling this and I am feeling very overwhelmed right now. What can I do differently, or what should I do differently? Sometimes a career change is the perfect choice, or sometimes modification of what you're doing is the perfect choice, or even a rest from it for a period of time. In the past, we've talked about burnout. We've talked about the danger of burnout. We've talked about feeling all these big and strong feelings. There have been times where I found it necessary to walk away from some of the people that I've been around, and just sometimes the dogs themselves, because then the dogs are in danger of a compromised person. Not that I would intentionally do anything wicked or harmful to the dogs, but it just means that the information that I'm giving them is fragmented. That's the issue itself, is having a conversation with somebody that has a very fragmented vocabulary is a dangerous thing, because you're not getting the direct message that the person is trying to convey properly. What they think they're saying to you may be comprehensive to them, but to the person receiving it, they're thinking, what the fuck did I just hear? What is this person saying? We've all been in conversations with people like that before. Like, I've been around people who have been inebriated, either alcohol or drugs, and they think they're telling me a perfectly logical story. And on the other end of that, it's just waffle. There's just nonsense coming out of their mouth. They're just spewing this incomprehensible bullshit that's coming out. They're having a good time with this. Like, it's not that they're bad people or they're doing anything terrible. It's just nonsense that's dribbling out of their mouth. And I've been in that situation before where I've been horribly drunk and I'm thinking, I'm making perfect sense. Why is this moron not getting what I'm saying? But I can't put two words together. And I've been in situations with dogs before where I've thought, I'm not making sense to this dog. The problem isn't the dog, it's me. The message that I'm trying to convey is wrong because I'm not in a good and sound state of mind. I really need to walk away from this. And this is an encouragement thing that I've tried to pass off to people over the years. Anybody that has listened to me in workshops or student training or just in general campfire chats that we've had before, or even through the podcast, if things aren't going well and you can feel your temperature raising, or that you can just see that your student is looking at you with eyes of, I don't understand you. I'm trying to comprehend what's happening here, but the message just isn't getting through to me. And then you're trying to hammer it home by raising your voice, or I talked about this before, by raising your voice, by getting irate about it, by having your temperature coming up, by having your heart beating faster. Those are red flag signs. They're times that tell you this is time for a rest. How long should the rest be? Well, it could be 5 minutes, it could be an hour, it could be a day, it could be a week, it could be a month. And sometimes for people, it's a complete change altogether. It's just time where they go, you know what, I'm not really good at this. I don't make a connection with my student. It's time to find a sea change or a tree change into something else.
Yeah. I think you sort of flirted around what I want to talk about next is this idea of pivoting quickly. You know, I've been in business now for 10 years, right? So in the next couple of months, it'll be 10 years since I left the army. So like been training dogs a long while, but that's since I had to enter the real world and get a real job. It's been 10 years. And in that time, I have circled the drain of leaving the dog world a couple of times, right? And here I am, right? It didn't go down. So I want to talk about why. And two specific examples. So the first time for me that I ever thought, oh, like I'm burning out on this was early days, actually. I was only a couple of years in and doing tons and tons of in-home behavior mod stuff. And basically all day, 5 days a week or more, I'm going into people's homes and having to sort of realign the way that they live with their dogs. And one of the things that still I'm much better at dealing with now, but used to sort of irk me a fair bit, was usually the best dogs have the worst outcomes with people, right? Like the dogs that you and I would look at and go, oh, this dog's great. Like this dog's full of go and wants to do cool stuff. And this is a dog that, you know, like as a trainer, we identify with and go like, oh, you're a great dog. I enjoy your company. They're usually dogs that are having the hardest time in the home of somebody who just wants a dog skin rug, right? Somebody who wanted a dog that is just going to sit on the couch and do nothing. And they got a dog that's really into doing stuff. And that's usually the worst combination. And so for me, I used to resent those people a little bit. And then my own dog died. And, you know, it was a dog many dogs ago, but it knocked me around a little bit because I really love that dog and I like doing cool stuff with that dog. Then I remember he died on, you know, like whatever it was, a Wednesday or whatever. And then as is my fashion, I tend not to like be slowed down by anything. I prefer to keep busy in times like that. So I was, you know, training clients the next day. And I remember being in people's homes and seeing that they didn't actually, I don't want to say they didn't love their dog because maybe they did, but they resented their dog, right? Like they did not see their dog as a thing that improved their life. And that's what they've called you for, right? That's my job, to be there to teach them how to, or help the dog become that thing. But I remember at the time thinking like, oh, like this doesn't feel good. I now have a level of contempt for these people who have a level of contempt for their dog. Because I was like, you got a fucking great dog here. My great dog's dead. Like I remember thinking that at one point, being like, just having that go through my mind of like, you don't know how fucking lucky you are. Your dog is here. Everything's fine with him. Let's do some training with this dog. That's probably the first time I ever kind of flirted with burnout. And it wasn't like I got up and quit, but I had the sense, like I had the wherewithal that I needed to just make sure I didn't take on any cases like that for a little while. And that was like financially, it was a kick in the dick. That was the body of my work at the time. And, you know, one of the issues is a lot of my work back then was just lily pad to lily pad type stuff. Like each job would create referrals 2 or 3 months later, that would be the next job. So I knew by taking some time off and not taking any of these kind of dogs, these kind of clients, that's not only going to affect me now, but that's going to affect me for several months down the track, right? Like that's going to affect the way that the funnel works and I'm going to have no work for a longer period. But I made that choice. I, at the time, was lucky enough to be able to do some other stuff, you know, like to make money at the time, and I was able to realign. The second time that I want to talk about is with the tool band. So you remember when I started working for Matt and it was like mid-COVID, dog work wasn't the same as what it is at the moment. We were having to do weird and different things. I couldn't travel the way that I could when things were going great in the business. Then the Queensland just suddenly one day banned prong collars. You remember that? Like it was just like a Sunday. There's a post on Instagram. They're congratulating themselves for fucking up the entire industry. And I remember thinking at the time, I was like, oh, fuck all this. I just can't fight this shit anymore. And I made a video about it and I was a part of that fight. And it just was like, I was like, you know what? I just don't want to be a part of this anymore. And so I immediately, I pivoted. I moved over and I started working with a friend of mine and I was helping him out. I was, you know, doing a small number of hours per week, which I then decided like, hey man, I'm going to start. Well, you know, I was already working a lot of hours. I just said to him, I'm going to start billing you for the actual hours that I'm working and, and turn this into a full-time job. And it didn't last, right? Because this is my thing. Being a dog trainer is my thing. That's what I always come back to. But I'm able to come back to it because I've never let it crash and burn. And I think that's the trick of avoiding true burnout. Burnout is only failure when you actually fucking burn out. Don't allow it to the fire to go out. Like don't allow that, the flame within yourself that is your desire to do this and to help people with their dogs and to train your own dogs and all that kind of stuff. Like if you let that flame actually extinguish, then yes, burnout equals failure. For sure, that's the case. But I think the trick is to identify that and say like, oh, I see where I'm headed here and I don't like it and I'm going to take action to change it. So there's preventative action. Like, of course, there's things that we can do in our day-to-day. We can look at our lives and sort of say like, am I doing the things that are necessary for me? Am I looking after myself in a way that allows me to be the best version of myself for other people? So I think one of the first things in terms of looking after your community is looking after yourself. It's the old life-saving analogy, right? Like when you swim out to save a drowning person, you can't just grab a hold of them or they'll fucking drown you as well, right? Like you have to stabilize them from a distance before you allow yourself to get too close to them, or else you go down together. So I think self-care is the first thing. Looking after yourself in terms of like your physical and mental health. Once you've got that sort of under control, it's then looking at and saying like, all right, well, what's a tempo? What's a rhythm that actually is sustainable? And I think that's one of the things that has been important to my life. And rhythm is the fourth hermetic principle. You hear me talk about that stuff all the time, but creating rituals and rhythms that are sustainable so that, you know, like it's inevitable. You're going to have hard times. There'll be days where you have tough clients. There'll be days where things don't go well. But what I tend to do is I try to create a ritual and rhythm to my week where I can know where those hard days are going to be. I used to be pretty good at doing this as well when I was doing a lot of traveling around, training dogs in people's homes, is if you get a sense that this is going to be a hard dog, that's a Thursday dog. That's a dog that I go and deal with on a Thursday. And that was always the case, that the really hard cases are a Thursday dog, because this is the sort of thing that's going to make me feel like I don't like doing this. This is potentially the kind of case that, I don't mean hard as in hard to train the dog. I mean hard cases in like one of the difficult ones to swallow. And that's a Thursday case because I know on Thursday night, I'm going to club. I'm going to go and do cool stuff with dogs. I know that whatever damage is done to me today mentally and psychologically about how I feel about dog training, it's going to be offset tonight because I'm going to put a bunch of weight on the scales of doing cool things with dogs who are dog people who want to do the kind of things that I want to do. So I know that I'm going to bed on Thursday night happy about what I've done with dogs today, no matter what happens in the morning and lunchtime, because I know in the evening I'm doing the coolest thing that I can do. And so creating rituals and rhythms about how you deal with the difficult cases, I think is really important, and not overdoing it, right? Like not taking on a bigger caseload than you can. I used to have a rule of only dealing with 4 headache dogs at a time. That was my thing. Like I had loads of dogs on the go, as any sort of in-home trainer does, but only up to 4 of them were dogs that were really tricky, like dogs that I had to hold a lot of mental space for. And the kind of dogs that, you know, these are the ones that if the owner calls you, sort of no matter what time they call you, you're going to have to answer, because these are people who are having really difficult times with their dogs in their house. And each input that they give is going to have a significant output. So you need to be available to those people. I used to only take on 4 of them at a time. And when one would graduate out, I'd be like, okay, sweet, I can take on another one. And there's a big part of that in having to, like, took me a long time to even not get good at, but even be able to do, is just to say to people like, no, I'm too busy. Sorry, like I'm not the person. I can't take that on. I can't take on your caseload because that would be too much for me to carry. I'm carrying all these other things. It's not worth the risk that I burn out in doing this. So setting yourself up to avoid burnout is super important. But the next thing, it's what you alluded to then, Glenn, and it's sort of where we're going with this whole thing, is I think it's pivoting, right? It's identifying like, oh shit, things are not going the way I want it to go. I don't feel the way I want to feel. Before I act in a way that I don't want to act, I'm going to change. I'm going to pivot my behavior. I'm going to change the way that I think about things. I'm going to change the way that I feel about things. And therefore I can change the things that I actually do day to day. Because I think when we're talking about those low negative emotions, and this is true of dog training as well, right? Is that behavior there's a lot of things going on before a behavior represents. And I think the first thing that like there's some sort of antecedent, like whatever sets it into motion. But for us, and I think it's probably the same with dogs, is like the first thing that comes into our mind, there's a thought, right? There's a thought. There's this idea of like, we start building the narrative in our mind about what's happening, why it's happening, and how we intend to deal with it. And those thoughts then end up metabolizing in our body and becoming an emotion. And once it becomes an emotion, now this is no longer just like, oh, this is a narrative in my head. This is a story that I'm telling myself. Once it becomes an emotion, now it's in your body, right? It's left your mind and it's in your body and it's driving you to feel a certain way. Maybe you feel sad, angry, adrenalized, whatever the things, that it's a feeling rather than a thought. And at that point, it's going to drive you to make an action. It's absolutely going to drive you to make an action. It's going to drive a behavior to happen. And so in terms of those negative emotions that we could have that would potentially drive us towards burnout, the idea is to notice those as a thought. like when the thoughts come up is to then pivot and act on those thoughts before they become an emotion. Because once it's an emotion, once it's in your body, then it is going to start driving behavior. And if you're not happy with the thought, you're sure as fuck not going to be happy with the emotion. And the emotion is going to drive a behavior that you're highly likely to regret later on. So I think that the idea is identify it as quick as possible, realize like, hey, I'm not happy with how this is going. I'm headed in a direction that I don't like. My workplace, the way that I deal with people, my clients, whatever it is culminating me to begin to think in a way that is going to create an emotion that doesn't serve me. And I'm not going to dive headfirst into that emotion because that emotion will create a behavior. But prior to this, while it's a thought and an emotion, you're the only one that's aware of this shit, right? Like nobody else has any idea this is going on. It's not until it metabolizes into a behavior and is something physical and something in the real world that then you're acting on. And that's when other people will see it. And by that stage, it's too fucking late. That ball is well rolling at that point. So identify it as a thought, avoid burnout by when you start to think, oh, maybe I'm burning out or I don't like this. Make the pivots then. Make the pivots before they become something that is actually in the real world. And as a result, when people do that, you can be accused. This is like people get trapped in the idea of like, how will I be perceived around this? And trust me, I get caught in that all the time. How will people see me for doing this? Like, how will other people think of how this goes? Their happiness is not your concern. That's another topic we could talk about all about, but it's like what they're thinking about it is probably very little. They're probably not thinking about it at all. And all of the things that you're inferring on them and all of the darkness that you're attributing to their thoughts, they're your thoughts. You're being mean to yourself through somebody else. So pivot as quickly as possible. That's all my good advice about burnout is pivot as quick as you can.
Yeah, I love that, mate. I think there's a really solid message in that for anybody who made the time to listen to it. And it made me reflect on some of my own thoughts and feelings over some of the things that you conjure up in your brain, especially in relation to giving other people power and agency over you. Often is the case that the only time that they're actually thinking about it is when you're talking about it with them, or that you're, like you sort of manifest this process with them where you kind of got to think to yourself, well, the long-term reality here, I need to change what I'm doing. I think this is where the precipice of the conversation really needs to take. The importance is you need to change something. Doing the same thing over and over, expecting a different result, as we know, is the definition of insanity. It's something that I've been faced with where I've done something, it hasn't worked, I've gone back. Even though I think I've modified it, I haven't modified it enough. It's so similar in the way and shape and the form that I'm doing it in that it's almost identical to the same behavior, and therefore it's doomed to failure. When you modify something, even if it's in a slightly different direction, it's still got to be in a different direction. It's still got to be off course from what you're currently doing. In argument's sake, like if you're the Titanic and you're heading towards an iceberg, you've got to make those corrections early or you're going to fucking hit the iceberg, which they did. They just didn't make enough of a correction. They thought they did, but the arrogance of everybody, this is an unsinkable ship. Like I wasn't there. I don't know the whole details of what happened to the Titanic. I only watched the movie. The reality is they hit the iceberg and the fucking ship sunk. Even though in retrospect, that ship should have gone out, everybody should have had a wonderful time and they should have returned to port. But if you don't start making these modifications, if you don't have those sound principles in mind, you are going to metaphorically strike your iceberg and then you're going to sink. That is going to happen to you. And that shouldn't be the case. It should be you leave, things are turbulent, weather is rough, things happen to you, but you should return to port. And you should think, okay, well, these things are my life. This is the normal life of anybody that is having a life, is sometimes seas are calm, sometimes seas are really turbulent, and it might throw you around. But that's what the life of a sailor is basically. Sometimes it's calm, sometimes it's all calm, and sometimes it's all rocky. We have to plan for that. We have to make all the allowances for that. And I know I'm speaking in metaphor. I understand that. And I often think about some of my own experiences. And to be honest, I'm kind of in a bit of a transitional phase myself at the moment. Things are changing at work. The company is getting significantly bigger. There are a lot more people that are involved. There's a lot more moving parts. You kind of dilute your presence or importance when things like that happen, when a lot of other people come into the organization. Like I'm certainly experiencing something like that at the moment. Those sort of things add a level of discomfort to what's actually happening. It doesn't mean that I don't like the people that I work with or I don't like my job, but I don't enjoy it the same way I used to enjoy it because it's probably due to that dilution factor where other people are involved. You have less time with the people that you used to have, and this is a natural occurrence. Things change, people get busy, you don't have access to the same things that you used to have, and that can make you feel uncomfortable. Sometimes that can make things manifest in your mind. And it has to me in past times. There's been times where I've experienced certain emotions. However, the one thing that I do, which I have encouraged other people to do, is I talk them out loud. Rather than think about what I think they're thinking or saying, I go and have a direct conversation with them and say, hey, I'm having these thoughts and feelings. It doesn't have to be in those exact words, but I just would like to talk about what's actually happening at the moment. And when doing that, you either find out the reality of, oh, it's true, or that's not exactly what was happening, or that's nothing even like what was happening. I was conjuring up. But you're better off actually knowing than not knowing. You're better off actually finding out the truth and the reality of it. Otherwise, you're doomed to build a jail cell in your own mind, which will trap you in there and it will keep pulling you down into a quagmire. It's like watching that movie, The Never-Ending Story, which still haunts me to this day and most other kids who are in the 80s, where the horse gets stuck in the mud and the kid's trying to get the horse out, but the horse just gives up.
That's The Princess Bride, I think, isn't it?
No, it's The Never-Ending Story.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah, it's a never-ending story. Artemis or something like that, I think the horse's name is. The bog is known. It's like the bog of despair or something like that. There's a Robin Williams movie, Where Dreams May Come or something like that, where both him and his wife die, but his wife goes to hell because she commits suicide, and he goes to heaven and realizes his wife is not with him. He needs to rescue her and he needs to go down, but she's in her own private hell where everything is just about despair and sorrow and depression. His guardian who takes him down to hell to rescue his wife says, you can't spend too long here, otherwise you will get caught up in the despair yourself. Like he's trying to rescue her and he's trying to bring her out of it. She's not really having anything to do with this. Like she's just caught in her own level of despair. Suddenly you see the character that Robin Williams is playing, he gets caught up in the despair as well, and then he starts to give up and just accept his fate that he's stuck there. But fortunately, good story, spoil alert if you want to see it, but his wife sort of comes good and then realizes, I remember who I was and I remember the best parts of me, and she sees him going through all this despair and suffering and then rescues him in return, and they get back up and it's a happily ever after story. But it's an interesting analogy or an example of some of the things that we sometimes do to ourselves by putting ourselves in these own prisons by not asking the right questions or changing things ever so incrementally that we can get ourselves out of them. I'm really proud of the person who asked that question because they're going through an identity where they realize something is happening that I need to be in control of in changing the way my future is playing out. Otherwise, I'm doomed to repeat the same mistakes and practices and rehearse the same nonsense over and over again, and therefore I won't be any better off. In fact, I'll be worse off because I'll sink further into the bog.
Yeah.
You really need to identify this, and sometimes you just can't do it by yourself. You can talk yourself in circles and you can really have these incredible conversations with yourself, but sometimes you're having a conversation with the monster that resides within. And again, the reason that I'm bringing that up is because I've said in the show, sometimes there's this thing that lurks within me, and it's trauma from childhood. It's a sinister side of me. It's me, but another form of me, one that I cage and keep in a dungeon because it's the worst version of me. And sometimes it calls out to me, and it calls out to me when people make me angry. It screams to be let out of the cage because it wants to unleash the most hellish atmosphere that it possibly can do. That's its purpose, because it's rage and it's hurt and it's violent and it's everything that I hated about myself. The problem with it is it brings nothing good to the table. Everything that it stands for is just monstrous. It still talks to me from time to time, and I've got to realize that what it's saying to me is super unhelpful. It's not doing anything good in my life. It stirs my mind up. It has really unhealthy thoughts and practices, and it's best staying as suppressed as I possibly can keep it. If I start having conversations with this bloody thing, I'm in a world of hurt. And this is why I do bring it up and have conversations with other people about it. It sounds crazy when you talk about these sort of things. I identify that itself, but everybody has that narrative that is talking to them as you're alone with yourself, with your own thoughts. And that's the thing that I'm talking about. Sometimes you have multiples. You actually have like a bit of an angel on your shoulder sometimes that says, don't listen to that diabolical darkness. You've got colleagues and you've got people in your life. Reach out to them and talk to them about it and let them know that you're having these really dark thoughts at the moment. They will actually help you workshop things through with you a bit. I have some remarkable conversations with you which have been very healthy and very life-altering in a good way. And same thing with Birdie. Even Narelle, there's been times where I've suppressed things in conversations with her, and she reminded me one day, she says, I'm your wife, I'm your partner, I'm somebody who wants to ride this through with you. You need to talk to me and you need to let me know how you're feeling. And that was a really pivotal, important conversation because I went through one of those pride moments where I wasn't feeling good and I wasn't happy about things and I was internalizing and I kept thinking, if I let Narelle know about this, she's going to be disappointed in me. But she was disappointed in me for keeping it from her. She was disappointed that she wasn't part of the conversation and she couldn't be part of that healthy course correction or at least workshopping it through with me. It doesn't mean that that person is going to be the entire relief, but at least they can be a chapter in the book where you can set things right and you can find the right person or talk to the right person. We are not invincible. We are not immortal. We are not built to last forever. We do get times where our brain starts to fragment and we need someone or sometimes a group, and this is why sometimes it's the village who raises you, that we need somebody to help defragment these terrible, terrible things that we feel like we have to shoulder and burden them within ourselves, and that's just not the case. This is why it's important to have good people around you. And when I'm saying good people around you, it's not people who confirm the shit that you're thinking. It's not people who say, yeah, let's throw more petrol on this fucking fire. I've been around those type of people before. They are so not the people that you want to have these healthy conversations with. I've had people before where I'm thinking, yes, this is what I need to do. This is the vindication I need to have. This is the justice or the revenge that I need to have in these sort of situations. And when I've been around more important people have said to me, let's just think about this for a little bit of time and let's map this out and see what it looks like, even if we do a couple of different pathways and have a look at how this actually plays out down the line for you. If you go ahead and do this based on the way that you're feeling or the way that your knucklehead mates are encouraging you to do, let's have a look at what that actually looks like and where this could be for you 6 months, 12 months from now. They can still be safe and reside in their little conclave, but for you, you'll become the patsy of other people's entertainment. Mate, I've been subject to that in the past when I've been a kid, when I've been impressionable, where I didn't have a good father figure to guide me and say to me, mate, fucking, pull up. Fortunately, I had a good uncle. Like he'd clip me in the ear and say, don't do that sort of stuff, mate. Don't let people use you in that fashion. Or sometimes they use you as a vessel. They use you as entertainment. Don't do those type of things. Sometimes I've ignored that advice. Sometimes I've thrown caution to the wind. Sometimes I've done it. It's played out exactly the way that it shouldn't have played out and made things worse. When wisdom comes to you finally, and when you are with wise and sage people, you will start to be able to see this and you will stop, you will pause, you will take a breath. And instead of being irrational and surrendering to this thing that is holding you down or holding you back, if you surrender to it, that's the worst possible thing that can happen. But if you actually take those pauses and take that breath and clear your mind and meditate on it or whatever you need to do, ask the universe or ask your wise and sage group of people, is this a good choice or do you think that I'm making bad decisions here? The people that care about you will sit with you and they'll say, well, that's a good question. Let's dive deep into this. I've listened to some really good conversations recently while I've been driving long distances, even listening back to some of the conversations Joe Rogan and Jordan Peterson have had together. They've had some really, really good questions where it's not just about attacking one thing, but looking at things in a spectrum, like looking at things and saying, okay, well, if you were to do this, let's look at the list of possibilities that could unfold because of your reckless and stupid behavior or even your ignorant behavior. And, ignorance is as powerful as stupidity or deliberation sometimes. Like you can claim, I was ignorant to that, and maybe you are. Maybe when you're making or thinking about doing reckless things, maybe it's through ignorance because you've never really been down that pathway before and it's a testing ground. Where wisdom comes into play here is when you can see that things are cascading in a bad direction. That's where your wisdom will withhold you from making ever further mistakes, like stepping forward into that decay cycle. You kind of look at it and go, no, this is bad. Things aren't going to get better here. They're actually going to get worse. I need to retreat from this, or I need to stop and reevaluate what's going on. Mate, you and your team were tactical and tacticians when you were involved in commandos and you were involved in planning contingencies and so forth. You have to look at situations and say, this will either mean our survival or this could be our demise. Like if we keep going further here, not only could I kill myself in doing this, but I could wipe all of you out in making this reckless decision just because my ego is getting hurt here. Or you could say, let's regroup, let's think about this. I need ideas from everybody. Going forward is suicide. Like it's going to absolutely explode in our face, literally in this sort of scenario. And metaphorically for somebody who's going through this in poor decision making, like we need to actually regroup here and speak externally about new plans, new ideas, and new strategies. I think to conclude on what I'm talking here, I'm trying to encourage people, don't do this alone. The journey of trying to resolve some of these internal thoughts and messages aren't best done alone. They are best done with wise and sage people and people who care about you. And when I have reached out for the advice and the connection with people like that, I found that not only has my decision-making got better, but my life has got better as well because I'm making better connections, I'm making better choices, and I also realize what good people actually look like. And good people aren't people that say they're good people or that think they're good people. They're good people by their actions. They care about other people. They talk well about other people. They plan for the futures to include other people in what they're doing. It's not just about pushing other people aside and making it all about them. It's the inclusion of building that village, like building the people around them, because they realize the only way that the village survives is everybody has an important role to play and everybody is as important as each other, because that's how real villages grow. So tackling something on your own when you're alone with your thoughts can lead you into a terrible decay cycle. And I'm speaking from experience, so listen to me, don't listen to me, Prestige Worldwide.
Yeah, okay. Well, so our topic was burnout. When does burnout equal failure? And in my opinion, burnout is only failure when you don't pivot, when you don't switch gears. And to our listener that wrote us this, I think that by virtue of the fact that you realized you're burning out, you've chosen to change directions, you're staying within the dog space and becoming a detection handler rather than doing in-home behavior mode, tells me that you made a perfect decision. I think that you've pivoted exactly as you should. I think that that's what we do is when you realize, hey, this is headed to a place I don't like, it is only failure if you stay on the train and go all the way to the place you had no plan to go to.
Exactly.
I saw a really cool quote the other day. I'm probably going to butcher it. When you realize that you're on the wrong train, it gets more and more expensive the longer you stay on to try and get home. And so I think that's the mantra for it, is like when you realize this isn't going the direction I want it to go, get off. You go in the wrong direction. Get off, because you're only getting further and further away from where you wanted to go. The moment you realize, pivot quickly, change direction, stay within the channel of what makes you happy.
I like that. Just to add to that, there was a post, I think Zoe Needy put it up a while ago. She was either a Canadian girl or a a US girl that she put up a bunch of pages on her Instagram about how lonely dog sports can be, how expensive it can be, how lost in your thoughts you can be, how you can face burnout. And it was asking questions, like people, I think that they look at it from the window of, oh, everything looks perfect. It looks like everything's going amazing and the sun's shining and the dogs are doing so well. It sort of pulls into perspective of there are days where you're really frustrated, days where you're really angry, days where you're really down on yourself, days where the raining consistently and you can't train, days where you've had a fight with somebody at your club and you're in a bit of conflict and a bit of turmoil with each other and things are happening in those sort of things. And that's why I'm saying is I feel that probably good conversations with good people, like even when I've been in conflict with people recently and I've reached out to them or they've reached out to me, we've had some good dialogue about it and workshop through things, because I can tell that if we actually sit down to talk about this, we can work through this. But if we don't, we're in another decay cycle, like we're only adding to our discomfort of what's actually going on around us. I don't want my time involved in dog sports or dog training to be full of discomfort, having awful people around me or anything like that. So I do everything I can to eliminate that or resolve it if I think it's worth it. If I think the person is actually a person of credibility and merit, it's not about meeting me all the way. It's meeting me halfway, so we can come together and say, well, this is where I feel wronged. And then the other person can say, thanks, man. Well, okay, I acknowledge that. And I'm sorry for my part in that. But there are some areas where I feel wronged as well. If you're a decent person, and this is where decency actually comes into these sort of conversations as well. If you're a decent person, you'll examine that and say, yeah, look, I did do the wrong thing there. I'm sorry about that. And I can see you are a good person and you're trying to make things better overall. So I don't want to add to this any further.
Well said. All right. That's it for another episode of the Canine Paradigm. As always, if you like what you hear, just like, rate, share, subscribe. Do that through whatever subscription service you download us from, and then go to another one, do it there. No one checks. If you want to support the show, you could jump into Patreon. That's a great way to support the show. A few bucks a month gets you a giant backlog of information as well as new stuff going forward. There's all different tiers in there. At $10, you can attend a live stream with me once a month, ask questions. Another way you can support the show is to get in a spring and get yourself some cool merch. There's links in the show notes to there. You can get T-shirts. You can get a giant wall tapestry.
Don't just walk over that tapestry. Like we've got to pause for a minute and talk about the importance of a tapestry.
You could get a giant 3 meter by 3 meter poster of us on your wall. It's made of cloth so that you could scrunch it up, put it in your bag, and take it to every event. You don't have to fold it carefully. It's with you, ready to go wherever you are.
That's right. There's a marquee set up there, and they've got their logo on it. Just go and pin ours over the top of it.
Grape ours over the top.
That's it.
Yep. Perfect.
Yep.
Okay, so now you've got your tapestry. If you want to get in touch with us to tell us about your wonderful tapestry. In fact, for those that make it to this far in, let's see some tapestry photos in the Facebook discussion group, because that's the best way to stay in touch with us. Jump into the Facebook discussion group, post your photos of your wall tapestries, and we can group source information there. There's usually a lot of people talking about cool stuff in there, and everybody's usually very polite with each other, and we like to keep it that way. So don't be a dick if you turn up. But if you want to be a dick and you want to tell us some bullshit to our faces, you can shoot us an email. We are info@thecanineparadigm.com. Love you all. Goodbye.